Hi, welcome to this episode of Author Eke. I'm Travis Davis, your host. Tell us your story. Hey, everybody, welcome to Author Eke. Today, I have Patti Munisteri. That's a tough one. I had to practice that. So she's got a great book. We are both through the same publisher. I met her a couple of weeks ago down in Houston at an event and want to get her on the podcast, tell her about her book. I started looking through it and reading it. I was like, Ascension Island, that I have got to learn about because that is in the middle of nowhere. If nobody knows where that is, look it up. It's in the Atlantic Ocean between South America and Africa. It's out there. I don't even know how you even get there. So, Patti, go ahead. Tell us about yourself.
Thank you so much, Travis. It was great meeting you at the Rally Against Censorship. I was born on the East Coast of the United States in New Jersey, and we moved to Texas in the 60s. But before then, we moved 13 times before I was 11 years old, all different places in the States, as well as one of my brothers was born in Canada, and we also lived in England. I went to public high school, graduated from Memorial High School, went on to Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. And that's where I had my real opening in terms of learning more about the world, about geopolitics, economics. And I was fortunate enough to have gained a couple of scholarships while I was there. I was on the debate team. I was on the Model United Nations team. And I won a fellowship to travel. At that time, it was supposed to be around the world through the Circumnavigators Fellowship when I was 20 years old. And that started my life of travel. I had to travel by myself, 5 different means of transport. And this was in the days before internet or cell phones and going behind the Iron Curtain. I start my book off there with that travel. And my life has been quite rich in all sorts of ways. I'm a mother. I was married to a U.S. Air Force PJ. I talk about what happened in our life, moving and traveling abroad. After he was in the military, he was a mountain guide on all the different mountains. Oh, wow. I talk about resilience after deaths in our family, and a little bit about my training starting at Georgetown and then continuing with the U.S. Army with the human terrain system and working in places like Afghanistan, Pakistan, Ascension Island, Ukraine in 2015 after Maidan. And this is a nonfiction book about my life and my perspective in the work I did overseas.
Excellent. So we have something in common. I used to guard the East-West German border and the Czech-German border. When I was in the Army, I was a Cav Scout. And our responsibility, I was with the 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment, but I was in 3rd Squadron, 7th Cav. And ours was Coburg sector, and then I also did the Czechoslovakian sector. So I've got firsthand looking from the outside in to what the Iron Curtain is. And for people to say, oh, they had all these barriers up. The barriers were never there to stop U.S. forces. They were there to stop their people getting out of the country.
Yes.
And when you tell folks that, they go, well, that's quite elaborate. Well, they didn't want anybody leaving. And they had quite a lot of extensive control measures and everything. But that's interesting. And so now I moved. My dad was in the Air Force, so I think before the 6th grade, I moved 4 times. Spain, New York, California, and back to Arkansas. Well, that's 4 or 5 times. So I get the whole moving thing. So that's pretty exciting, though. So where was your favorite? Where's your favorite place to go? And what do you think was the most dangerous outside of a war zone?
I'd say for a short trip, the most favorite place that I've been was Malta in the Mediterranean.
Okay.
Surprisingly, just beautiful, very friendly people I found. I liked the culture there. It was relaxed. I wasn't there very, very long, but it's a favorite destination spot I've already been. I'd say Malta.
Oh, nice. All right.
And other place to be besides a conflict zone, I would have to say parts of the Middle East, Jordan and Israel.
Okay, just
Yes, in
uncomfortable.
terms of interest of the landscape, the history, I love the food.
Oh yeah, I love Mediterranean food. Oh my God, love it.
Yes.
Definitely, definitely. So, do you still like traveling? I mean, I think you're like, okay, I'm done, I'm burned out. You know, especially with today, air travel is like no fun at all.
I agree with you. I would say, yes, I still like to travel, although traveling has changed so much, especially even in just the last 2 years. However, I didn't start my working life out thinking that I was going to be traveling for work. That's as much as I have. And being known for working well in conflict zones and then getting more and more jobs that only went there. So I would say at this stage of my life, there's a couple of places I would like to go. I'd like to go to Bhutan. I'd like to go to Mongolia. And I've never been to Sardinia. I'd like to go to those places.
Well, it'd be nice to know. My next book, actually, part of it takes place in Mongolia.
Aha, okay.
And Inner Mongolia, Mongolia and Inner Mongolia. Yeah. So I just made, put somewhere cool. Okay, Mongolia is close to China. Makes sense.
Yes, I've been to China. I trained in China with the Shaolin in 2018, 2019, fortunately before everything closed down.
Right.
But Mongolia really intrigues me. I'd like to go by horseback on the Altai Peninsula, if you're going there.
Yeah, if you go, first you got to get there. I mean, that's like all these places you're going. So tell Extension Island. So I'm interested about that because when I retired, I'm like, where can I retire? And go was kind of cool. And I was like, man, I could go there, but then I found out where it was at, and it's like, wow, it's way out there. Did you fly there, or was there a ship? I mean, how do you get down?
Again, this was for work. It was a short-term contract. Most people don't realize that Ascension Island's not a country. It's just a military base.
Yeah.
US, UK. Yeah. I didn't realize it was a US military base. I went through Bryce Norton through the UK military for my contract. I talk about it extensively in that chapter.
Yeah.
Very strange place in a way because they don't have the same sort of governance. However, in terms of natural beauty and seeing the very large turtles, that go across from the Galapagos, the green turtles, it's a remarkable place. But I talk about it in the book. It's also, we called it a beautiful hell. There's a lot of nefarious activities that can go on unaccounted for, and that I firsthand observed, but you can't really do very much about it. It really is like in the middle of nowhere, although I haven't been there for 10 years, but no cell phones used to work there, only military comms.
No, sat or something. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's nothing there. They're probably 1,800 miles away from any land, or maybe further.
And the stars are spectacular, and NASA used to have an outpost there too.
All right, all right. So what made you write your book? I mean, it interests me when people say, "Oh, I wrote a book." I'm like, why? I mean, what? You just want to get your story out? Tell us why you wrote it, and what do you find the most challenging and most rewarding parts of authoring a book?
Fair question. I have written quite a bit more technical writing. You can find my writing on Small Wars Journal, Real Clear Defense. I used to write for Communities Digital News for their geopolitical analysis, and a lot of technical writing for my work. But since I was young, I wrote poetry and short stories. In fact, in 1999, I was named a Texas Artist for Life, which I joked meant I was going to be broke for the rest of my life.
You're somebody's going to pay in your lunch.
And that was for partly for my poetry, as well as for, at that time, I was a professional performing artist. I was on Broadway in very many different theater productions, and I was a choreographer. And that's how we got to New Zealand. I was a choreographer for the National Maori Dance Company. So
Holy smokes.
I've always been interested in writing. When, and I talk about this in the book is dedicated to a good friend and teammate of mine. We went through the Army training at Fort Leavenworth together. We were together for a little while working in Borneo and then working in Afghanistan, and she was fatally, excuse me, shot in December of 2015. And she was a remarkable person. So part of it was that, and part of it also my my son Denali and his father, my ex Marty Schmidt, they were killed on K2 in 2013.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Oh, terrible.
Yes, and my daughter had started a publishing company before. I decided with this book it was better to separate
Yes,
finances.
sometimes it is.
And also, I felt freer to write what I wanted and needed to write. And Defiance Press was great. It's great with the editors too. So
yeah, they are very good.
That's why I wrote the book. And also because most people don't know about the humanitarian work in conflict zones. I know because I looked for books myself before I was going into them. And other than military or journalistic accounts, there's not too many accounts of what it's like, especially in more than one conflict zone.
Right.
So, those are all the reasons I decided to write this.
That's amazing. Sorry to hear about your husband and son. K2, by the way, is second tallest mountain in the world for y'all, that and probably climbed less than Mount Everest.
Oh, much less. Yes.
Yeah.
And it's the most dangerous statistically.
Exactly. So you got anything else you're gonna write about? I mean, you're gonna, I mean, there's always space. I mean,
Yes. Well, I decided to self-publish my latest poetry book, which just came out last year. It's called, and it's with my son was a painter. He had just graduated from California College of the Arts. He was also a great alpinist and skier and adventure sports. So it's called Clash, Poems from Conflict Zones mostly. And it has photos of much of my son's work, and the cover is by my son. So it was a way to have memories of him as well as my own personal creative writing. That's my second poetry book. My first one's called Kismet.
Okay.
And that's the one that I won an award for. I'm writing another book now called Traveler Between Worlds. And on my website, which is JoPattiX, JoPattix.com, I have I show the cover and a little outline of what's in it. That goes up through last summer because I was fortunate to be a grantee for Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. It's a program started by Marcus and Amber Capone using what they technically call plant medicine. So I was very fortunate to go down to Mexico with their treatment plan there. And that opened a whole nother world of seeing things. Excuse me, I'm still sort of processing it.
Right.
And nobody's written about that. So I'm going to write, that will be one of my chapters.
And when do you think that's going to be out?
Well, my original thought was the end of 2023, but I think it'll be more like the beginning of 2024 because I still have, I'm starting a new job in about 10 days.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you. Very happy about it here at Shepherd Air Force Base. And yes, I'm still doing training and much busier. And maybe as many families have experienced, we've had a number of deaths in our family and some imminent deaths. People are not doing very well. So it's been busy physically, but busy emotionally. So I think I'm going to change my timeline a little bit to do the book justice.
Well, but even with very minimal distractions, it's an effort to write a book and get it out, within 6 months, 9 months. I mean, it's an effort just to be able because everybody has things they're doing, but you do it, you start writing, you want to write something else on it, I want to add to it. There's always that fluctuation in the book to be able to say, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not going to do any more. I'm done. I'm going to shove it out the door. So it does take a while. Are you self-publishing or Defiance Press publishing, or have you decided what you're going to do?
I have a personal goal of who I'd like to publish it and who's tentatively interested. I know the publishing companies are going through really hard time. I know
Oh, yeah. They're
what
big
my
layoffs.
daughter's saying. My daughter's company's doing very well, D'Angelo Publications out of Idaho and Texas. But yes, so I haven't quite decided. I do think I'm going to shop the chapter outlines around because I think it's a topic that will be both timely and classic about healing from post-trauma.
Right.
Oh
yeah, people deal with it all the time.
After the pandemic. Excuse me?
People deal with it all the time, and now, and it seems like there's just more calamity in the world. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
No, having worked in Ukraine, and both Ukraine and Russia, what's happening over in that part of the world is just unbelievably horrible. I don't think people realize the magnitude of death. We had over a 20-year war. I think something like 6,000 die, and over 3,000, 4,000 will die in a week. I just read a pretty accurate assessment. I think that in the first year of this conflict over there, there's over 500,000 dead and over 10 million displaced, and over 3.5 million seriously wounded. The numbers most people can't even comprehend. Yeah.
Well, that's World War II numbers. That's bigger than Vietnam, and that's World War II. Not as big as World War II, granted, but that is a lot.
And we're talking about a country that's not got as many. Wasn't as densely populated as many. But besides that, we have more information neuroscience wise, more information as people are coming forward from all different countries, from Israel, which has been never out of conflict since it was founded, Afghanistan, Iraq. I was in Iraq until March of 2020. So in Kurdistan region. So yes, and even for people who aren't in war zones, what happened during the restrictions under the guise of COVID-19, people, especially children, are still dealing with. And I work
dealing with it forever
in emergencies, so that is very important to me to have people be aware on an individual basis. What happens when you do this to children.
Oh, they'll be feeling the repercussions of that for years.
Yes,
I think everybody will.
Yes.
Terrible. So, you're fascinating. You got a fascinating story, to say the least, and traveling off the X. So what's the title? How did you come up with the title? What's that about? X marks the spot.
X for target, because I did work after my training in the Army. Work for those people who know what this is. I won't go into specifics, but for MISTF, MISTF, Alpha, in support of the 82nd at NKC in Kabul. And most of my jobs have been living and working. I was on base sometimes for various deployments, 5 times to Afghanistan, twice to Iraq, but in Pakistan, in Siberia, on Ascension Island. I lived and worked in the communities there most of the time. So I had a different perspective than most, but it was very dangerous. I can look back now and think, by the grace of God, I'm still here. And many of my colleagues are not. We had to go out almost every day, what would be called to civilians outside the wire, which means into the cities. And some people had asked me at one point, do you ever want to get off an X? An X meaning a point of danger. But in the book, I put it not just as physical danger, also emotional danger.
Mhm.
And I even talk about spiritual danger. Some places where terrible things have happened, when you go in, you feel a great darkness there. And yet sometimes that's where I would have to go.
I think it's like the same as you go into the concentration camps, Buchenwald, anywhere in Germany. You feel there's just something wrong. It just feels wrong.
And often terrible things have happened there.
Yeah. Exactly.
I didn't always know before I went. I would find out from local people. Sometimes my employers wouldn't tell me.
You wouldn't go.
And I've always been a contractor. I want to make that clear.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I would recommend anybody that doesn't like to travel but wants to learn about traveling or different places. It's a great book. Or anybody that traveling and wants to go someplace else. This is probably a great book. That some places you probably wouldn't go right now. I'm not a tour guide or advisor, or some places I just wouldn't recommend that you go. But it's a great and fascinating real life story of your adventures, in your adult life, mainly, I would assume, right? So
yes, starting when I was 20.
Yep.
I was dropped behind the Iron Curtain then. I would say also for people who want to know, so I talk about some strategies about the way we got off the X's or navigated through the X's, and also about resilience, because there are people who have lost their adult children or their children died, or members of their families have died, colleagues have died in violent ways. And it is very tough getting through, but you can get through.
Yeah, I agree 100%. There's light at the other in the tunnel. You just gotta persevere, I guess, and believe.
I think there's
whatever mechanisms you
all
have.
different strategies.
Yeah, there's all sorts of ways. Do whatever helps.
Yes.
And don't be afraid to talk to people.
Yes, and also I was in places where people had so much worse happening to them than I did. It put it in perspective.
Yeah, that's very, very true. Well, it was great meeting you and learning more about you and your book. And so, Traveling Off the X. And where could people get it?
Yes, well, Traveling Off the X, as behind me and right here.
There you go.
It's not a huge book, 300 or so pages, and my poetry book, Clash.
I have mine too.
Great, thank you. Defiance Press is great about putting it out on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. I have my website, as I mentioned, jopattix.com, which has a link to all the places to get the book and my articles, as well as a preview of my upcoming book, Traveler Between Worlds. So if you go on that site, that will give you most of the information you need.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing your story with us, because from communism to radical Islam to everything in between, that's quite an extraordinary time frame and some adventures. Well, great. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Travis.
Thank you.
Week.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Author Eke. There'll be another episode next week. Please stop by and start your own story. We can't wait to hear it.